Hello, listeners. Welcome to everybody here on Congress for Global Communication Action Group for Climate. We appreciate having you all tune in to listen to us. My name is Eni Mesa Alexander. I live currently in the Dayton area, specifically Dayton, Ohio, but originally I'm from Ghana, and I'm going to be your host. So, before I introduce the members, I will go ahead and introduce one of our dear members, Pastor Gary Wilkinson, to give a little information about our vision, mission, and then purpose for you to also know some of the great things that we are doing and how we intend to be able to do the best we can to save what is going on in terms of the climate and the changes. So, Pastor Gary, it's your turn to tell us a little bit about what CGC does and what the group does. Thank you.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We welcome you. And we just want to introduce you to the vision of CGC, the Climate for Global Communications. And it exists to promote diverse and inclusive dialogue, resulting in civility for all. And with that, our mission at CGC, the Congress for Global Communication, is to build global connections and communication for the advancement of sustainable development goals by providing training, policy recommendations, and empowerment forums with an overall scope of transforming the world. Our purpose is to encourage dialogue, to impact humanity through collaborative global communication, and to be a resource for sustainable development goals. And that is the heart of the Congress for Global Communication Climate Action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Gary. To continue with our program, it would be nice to also get the opportunity for the members today or participants today to share a little bit about their background. And we'll start with Pastor Gary and we continue from there. So, Pastor Gary, the opportunity is all yours for people to know who you are, and then we can proceed from there.
Well, thank you. Thank you again. Yes, I am Pastor Gary Wilkerson. I hail originally from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but I live now in Southern California. And to simply put it, I'm a man of God. Everything that I do is built on the foundation of serving the kingdom of God. And so I do have a ministry that I head up. It's Calling Down Heaven Ministries, which is a global outreach and missions program to where I mentor young pastors globally, particularly in Africa and Pakistan, with an emphasis on entrepreneurship. With that, also here locally in Southern California, I am part of a men's discipleship program called Men of Courage, where we get down to the nuts and bolts of life issues for men to bring them into a place of vulnerability and growth in their walk with God. Aside from that, I am also a commodities consultant globally and involved in various types of commodities. And my heart really is to build a bridge for networking technologies globally from Western side of the world to Africa and other countries who are not as privileged to have the resources in their hands. So I have a bridge that I network these bodies of works where we together, emphasis is always for me on unity, where we together can build a greater world for everyone.
Thank you so much for your great introduction. We'll go next to Sheridan, who is based in Trinidad and Tobago, to also give us a lot of background about him. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Alex. Yes, I'm Sheridan Woodruff, located in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, lives in Trinidad. Trinidad and Tobago being the most southerly of the Caribbean islands. So we are very close to Venezuela, actually, just on the tip of Venezuela. On a very clear, bright day on the southernmost part of Trinidad, you can have and see Venezuela, parts of it very clearly. It's just about 10 miles therein. My background basically, well, I'm retired and basically now I'm more into consultancy, and that consultancy is varied. I'm very active in my church as a lay minister, and also in a part of Trinidad, head the men's ministry in terms of all the parishes that come together for men's ministry. So I could sort of see where Pastor Gary is also involved. So, we have something in common there. My background in terms of academics, I'm still involved at the University of the West Indies as the president of the University of the West Indies, Trinidad and Tobago chapter president. But I'm also on the council throughout the university. As you may be aware, the University of the West Indies is one of its very few of its kind in the world, comprising of so many different campuses in different islands. My academic background is public sector management, community and cooperative development. And when I was invited to be part of this committee, I was wondering what role can I play? And then as I continued to research, I realized that community development and cooperative, in which I will speak a bit more when the question comes up, are very relevant, especially in this economic and social changes that are taking place globally. It's an opportunity for us to, and it goes back to what I always argue, Pastor Gary, that if us as human beings really understand, God intended us to be cooperative beings, because from the beginning, that's how it was. And therefore, I feel a passion about the subject matter, a passion for people in general, and especially young people, because I myself got my first break at the age of 12 to be the secretary of a men's group in my church. And so I have that passion and continue to be, and I do look forward to continue contributing in this illustrious grouping of persons in terms of looking at these global issues, particularly when it comes to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your background sharing with us. We'll go next to Dr. Jackie, who is based in the USA. So Dr. Jackie, can you share a little bit about yourself and your background? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alex Enim Mensah. I'm very thankful for this opportunity to join this panel discussion. I'm very honored and grateful to be given this opportunity to communicate and also bring awareness on critical topic that impacts humanity in general. Again, my name is Dr. Jackie Enim, and I'm an industry leader, originally born from Ghana, and a subject expert in the area of material utilization for manufacturing, and advocate for proper material use and environmental sustainability, as well as material end of use management. After the material has been utilized, how to manage the afterlife. My background is chemical engineering. I'm a university instructor and numerous awards with a lot of diverse areas and that improves human life. And finally, I am the founder and president of a non-governmental organization called Smiling Hope Ministry, with a strong intent and mission to give back to the community and to the desolate that are located in our society. And having said that, again, I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your background. The next person coming on board is Atta Junior Kufuor, who is currently based in Kumasi, Ghana. We want him also to share his background with us. So Kufuor, the floor is yours. It seems your mic is muted. Your mic is muted, so...
Thank you very much. My name is Atta Junior Kufuor. I'm a chartered analyst by profession and also a computer engineer as well. I'm based in, and I'm also the vice president of Silicon Valley of Ghana. I work with top technologians in Ghana and also champion some kind of technological development for the government of Ghana privately. And I feel it's very good for me to also contribute to the development of climate change. It's an organization that I'm much more interested because of the new diverse areas coming on board in the climate change areas. And I'll also be happy we also extend climate change action also to Ghana to bring more people that have much more ideas in terms of foreign policies in climate change, technology, and other stuff from Ghana. So I am much happy to join this organization. We want to move to a high level in terms of technology development that will contribute to a climate change action plan. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your background. Thank you all also for sharing everything about you. Agenda on the list here is to share the flow of this discussion. First, there's going to be a question that all of us will chip in and discuss, and then there will be specific questions that will be directed towards each of us. And after that, the lead person, throwing in the best, anybody can chime in to also share more. Because whatever it is, climate change, climate action, the impact of climate change, whatever is going on, if you care or not care, whatever it is, it affects you. Mm-hmm. So however good, however bad, whatever it is, your questions will go a long way for us to think about this, to come up with answers to the way that to benefit all of us. So this is no right or wrong discussion, because however the discussion goes, we are all going to learn from it. We're all going to kind of learn something good from it and prevent what is going on currently. So with that, I'm going to share with us a simple question, and then we'll all chip in. The question is, this is what everybody asks: what are some of the impact of global change? Can anybody chime in to say just a simple impact, and then we can discuss? But there are so many of them. What is causing it? I know there's a natural cause. There's also an artificial cause, which is caused by men. And that's all I will say that I know of. Can anybody come in with more?
Again, I'm Pastor Gary. I would be happy to chime in concerning the impacts of climate change. I'm a novice at this, and when I was introduced to it, I had no idea, concept as to how I could be useful in it. But as I began to research, and I continue to research more deeply, one of the things that stands out to me is the fact that there's a great divide. And when I say a great divide, I'm speaking that between all of the individual organizations globally, many of them, their operation, a mode of operation, seems to be a non-universal mode of operation. It seems that they're targeting their own specific goals rather than looking at the potential and the power of unifying with other groups who have the same interest in seeking out how we can impact climate change for good. And so that's the thing that stands out to me. As I said previously, my mind always goes towards unification, because that's where all of the answers lie, and that's where all the power is. It's in unification. So to me, one of the greater impacts to climate change is the lack of unity.
Can anybody chime in?
Yes, so I will follow up by saying that the impact of climate change on different sectors of societies are interconnected. Drought at one location can harm food production and human health in general, as well as flooding can lead to disease spread and damage to the ecosystem. So flood on one side is a drought, represent itself as a drought on the other side of the continent. And the impact on infrastructure, inability to drive, inability to transport food from location A to B, human health, inability to get medication across, can also increase mortality, food availability, limit work productivity. If there's a severe snowstorm, people are not able to go to work. So, and if the work is such that they need to be physically present, it becomes an impossible task. So climate changes cannot be handled in isolation because they are very interconnected. And the change is currently impacting health in different ways. It's impacting development, innovation, and also waterborne diseases, mental health. If you are isolated because you're cut off from the rest of the community because of flood, in some cases, it can lead to emotional instability. So, yeah, that's my contribution to that particular question.
Yeah. Sheridan, do you have anything to add? Because the impact
I would join. I would just join the conversation. Yes, Dr. Alex, Sheridan here.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I just want to add that first of all, water can be positive. Water can be positive or negative, and my colleague has already indicated, particularly when you think of the developing countries in particular, and the impact that overall social, the climate change will have generally. But when you consider that the serious threat to global food security, one, but also sustainable development and poverty eradication, it means that the persons on the lowest ladder of things will be impacted most certainly. And that is a concern, therefore, in terms of when you consider further the world's growing population, and particularly that impact in the necessity to increase food production. Therefore, when we think of developing countries in particular, we need to recognize that negative impact in terms of what climate change can bring about. And I want to link that to what Pastor Gary has said in terms of the unification, because so often the answers for these problems seem to come from the North and not adequately bring into consideration the thinking on the ground, the little people, in terms of how these things are going to impact. And therefore, my concern, or one of them at least, is the whole community aspect, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about the question of food security, the involvement of the communities are critical in going forward. So the concept of unification, the concept of involvement, the concept of participation, and how those things are going to relate to the whole question of food security. I just wanted to add.
Okay. Thank you so much for your feedback. You know, if you look at the topic here, impact of climate change on food security. In food security, we have food production. But the reverse can also be true, that in the course of producing your food, it will happen that you are also going to impact climate. That's another thing. But I'll open the floor a little bit for Kufuor to also chime in what he thinks is contributing to what are some of the impact of climate change, and we'll come to this little thing that I've mentioned about that our agricultural practices may even contribute to climate change, right? So how should we do it? So Kufuor, what are some of your views, in case you have one, in terms of some of the impact of climate change?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Climate change is very big, very, very big. If I'm to use huge, I could use huge. And there are so many branches that keeps connecting to the mainstreams that we already have. And when it comes to the aspect of food security, climate change, I believe the top countries or the developed countries have advanced much more in terms of dealing with problems that are rising in food security. When it comes to Africa, Africa is also doing very well in terms of establishing institutions that will curb down insecurity in the aspect of food security. Let's look at health. The health connect directly to the consumptions, okay, from food to materials, and also into research into materials, into medicines, the application of nanotechnology, and new diverse areas that are coming to improve technologies in all fields, including engineering, health, biomedical stuffs, and all that. And during the time of the COVID, there were a lot of research that came out with different kind of mindset. Others also came to challenge the already written laws that we had in terms of biology studies, medicine, and other stuff. So the climate change is bringing a lot of innovations into the system through these actions of blueprints and other stuff. There are research into investigations that are also scientifically proven. Some of them, they are yet to be proven, that are contributing to this effect. In energy, you will see most of the countries being stopped to use coal, okay, just to protect the skies, the ozones, and other stuff. All these contribute to climate change. How does this link to the food security or food insecurity with the applications of climate change development? Okay, so now if we don't have a better health system, or there's something that is negatively destroying our health, we will not be able to reach certain goals. So the health, the energy, and the other fields are interconnected. As Madam or Dr. Jackie said, they are interconnected. From the energy application, the hazardous kind of system that some of the poor countries have, linking to the environmental defect, okay, to the health system, then to the physical systems of human, okay. So to solve these problems, we need to look at diverse areas from engineering to health and research into materials, clean energy, and other things that will help us to be able to overcome certain challenges in the human life development. It's not only health, it's not only engineering, it's not only in space, it's not only in maybe environmental science. It links to the other sectors that we have to look at. So it's a big job for many people, many ideologies to contribute, okay, from the health. For instance, sending a drug to a tissue, okay, of a body, or to activate a cell in the system has to do with new development in nanotechnology to bring up new devices, new machines, new drug systems, okay, to cure some kind of incurable diseases, okay, like cancer medicines and other. So there are new ways of doing things, and the climate change action plan in developing the health sector, the engineering sector, the power sector is also going to help to bring more technologies or advance the human living to take us to a different stage of life or different stage of living. So
Okay.
this is
So
what I have to
we
say.
may have to pause at this point because of time issue. So I did mention about we trying to, in the light of climate change, we trying to look into food security, the impact of climate change. And I also mentioned that the reverse could be true, that if you don't practice a very good agricultural process, it might also impact on on climate. That's supposed to be something at the back of our head. Can someone talk briefly about this? Because we know of overgrazing. If we have our livestock and they consume all the plant around, that can also lead to what? Deforestation, which can also contribute to greenhouse gas and the rest. So can someone talk a little bit about this briefly, and then we can go to the next topic?
Yeah, how possible? Okay, madam, please, the floor is for you.
Dr. Jackie, you're on mute. So you're on mute, Dr. Jackie. Can you unmute
Sorry about
yourself?
that. Yeah, I was going to say that when it comes to large industrialization, the agricultural system under that concept consumes a lot of fossil fuel, including water and topsoil at a non-sustainable rate.
Great.
And its contribution on numerous farms and the environment is really huge when it comes to degradation and even air pollution, which may not exclude water pollution. Even though the intent of large industrialization is supposed to produce more food and have food security, the environmental sacrifice is very substantial. Mm-hmm. And this needs a balance. I think the lack of balance is a major contributor to climate change adversities. And that may lead to the other part of the argument when it comes to food security. How do you balance industrial agriculture to food security around the world? And what is the strategy? Do we have a strategy today to seek for that type of balance? But that is an area that needs a lot of research, and we need to invest a lot of time in that area, trying to balance the two.
Yeah, I would. Important. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I would agree with her wholeheartedly. A balance is a major issue, even when you consider some of the basic practices of the farmers, concerning agricultural practices contributing to climate change. Two of the things that I looked at are very basic, simple things that can, I believe, very easily be corrected. And those are mismanagement of soil crop rotations. Something as simple as that can make a very big difference in the overall process and productivity when it comes to agriculture. And then the other side of that is the use of chemical pesticides. And especially now in the times that we're in now, there are so many biological green processes of bringing nutriments to the soils, and instead of using chemical pesticides that help greatly. And so getting the farmers to transition into the mode of utilizing these types of resources that are now available, I believe can really help to bring that balance that we're talking about here today.
That's very important. The reason why I brought up this topic is, Sheridan, there's a question that we were talking about unification. The unification aspect, we have the developed world and undeveloped world, right? Or developing world. Those agricultural practices in those countries, right, by the farmers, some of the processes could lead to climate change itself. So as part of thinking about unification, we may have to think about how can we adapt any principle that we bring out from the developed world into the developing world. It should be a little different. Because let's say in Ghana, some of the farmers practicing subsistence farming, they do slash and burn, meaning that they cut the crops, they cut the weed, and they burn them, and then all the gases go into the atmosphere, fly ash, all those stuff, and then they might wait for some time for the rains to come in before they do their planting. You know that trees are sometimes some people refer to it as the lungs of the human being, because they absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen during the daytime or during photosynthesis. So it's something that we have to share with our listeners that, hey, you are still producing food in the light of climate change, but if you don't do it very well, you end up hurting the environment the more. Imagine so many local farmers, slashing and burning and leaving the land open. Drought can come in. The land is also exposed. So there are so many things. So this will lead into the first question for Sheridan. Sheridan, there's a question for you, but afterwards anybody can chime in. the question here is, how can farmers locally collaborate to better understand and appreciate the implication of climate change on their food production?
Thank you very much, Dr. Alex. Certainly, as we consider what has been shared before, it is clear that there need to be transformation in terms of how agriculture is done throughout the world globally. And therefore, it is against this background that I consider the whole concept of not just having individual farmers do things, but by introducing and developing agricultural cooperatives that not only brings the farmer face to face with the whole question of production, but also being able to relate with others in terms of, one, the impact of climate change, the kind of crops and the rotation of crops that Pastor Gary referred to, how that can be done. And when it is done in a collective manner, it certainly will have more impact, positive impact, not only in terms of the collaboration effort, but certainly in terms of being able to share resources, because the individual farmer may not be able to address some of the things that are needed, even in terms of the assets that are required. But when those assets are pooled, it means that you're looking at the broader picture and not just the individual farmland, and what that could mean in terms of the overall productivity, economic factors, social factors, and all the other things that will go in a comprehensive manner. So what my submission here is that moving away from the individual approach and looking at a more cooperative approach can be more effective in ensuring not only the productivity levels go up, but also in terms of what are required. So for example, the question of storage. The individual farmer may not be able to store because he just or she doesn't have the capacity to do so. But in a cooperative environment, they would be able to have that storage capacity, not only in terms of being able to grow more, depending on the soil, depending on the weather pattern, etc. But again, they would be able to benefit from that wider situation. The whole question of the diversity of the food resources and the food sources, and in terms of the production techniques that was referred to earlier, in helping to reduce risk is very, very important. The question of adopting water management systems. Now, again, if they are able to, by pooling together, they would better be able to, whatever is required, to reduce the question of crop damage from floods, for example, or droughts. The question as well of supporting the small farmers in terms of that overall question of food security and meeting some of the ongoing challenges, because it's not a one and done kind of challenge. The challenges will be ongoing, the challenges will be changing, and the training component that will come from being involved in that cooperative effort will assist the farmers generally and of course individually in addressing some of those concerns and what have been referred to earlier. So I would like to suggest that one of the ways, particularly in the developing countries, that coming together, and I know there are some big agricultural cooperatives in North America, but certainly to my mind and from my own research, there's not enough in terms of in the developing countries, certainly in the Caribbean, that will require farmers to come together in order to be able to be more effective in dealing and efficiently in dealing with climate change. That would be my initial response.
Thank you so much. Can someone chime in before I bring, some questions to follow up for this?
Yeah, I want to add this. It's very important we also look at the application of weedicides in farming, especially in Africa, because some key plants that releases some gas, okay, also makes the environment healthy.
In terms of
food crops that we enjoy the vegetables and other stuff, the food stuff that we enjoyed, if they are being poisoned from the farm, is going to also harm the human system in terms of health. So when it comes to agriculture, we can look at from the industrial level of producing and advising positively the good impact of agribusiness, farming, animal farming, and other materials or other products that are useful for farming. So if we look at it, I think it will also be helpful.
So basically, you're talking about green farming, such a way that we don't use some of the toxic chemicals, which will come back to harm us. You know, because sometimes when you use toxic chemicals, they get into the ground, the plant will pick them again and will end up eating the plant. So basically, I think that's where, I mean, what it's talking about. Pastor Gary, do you have anything to talk about?
Not to that topic specifically.
Okay. So, Sheridan, I have a quick question. I mean, you spoke about cooperative farming, but my question here is, cooperative farming, who is going to fund that? Is it the government or is it the farmers themselves? Sometimes it's going to be more like how much they make is already stretched, and now they are forming a cooperative farming. The storage you were talking about, someone have to put money in, someone have to drive this. So in that case, you know, how is that supposed to be driven? By the community, by the government, especially when it comes to initial investment?
1 second. Yeah. First of all, the basic principle of cooperatives, it must be the people themselves doing it. I think it's a misconception to think that the farmers themselves are not able to come together in terms of generating the capital. I have seen where governments got involved in cooperatives and the cooperatives failed simply because it was not from the ground up. And yes, the capital is necessary. Now, they're depending on the government's approach. It must never be that you just give people things free. Again, I can't talk for other parts of the world, and I know in the Caribbean, when you just give people things free, they don't appreciate it in the manner when they have to labor for it. And therefore, it could be a combination of things. A combination meaning that the farmers, first of all, getting together. In some countries, certainly like here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a cooperative division that helps in terms of training and so on. But in terms of the capital input, it must be guarded. And of course, we need the government support in terms of the policies of the government, but never must be that the government just dictate the pace. The farmers must be able to. I remember when I did development studies in Canada many years ago, the example was given of the UN going into Bangladesh in order to be able to do some irrigation work. And the farmers keep telling them, telling the engineers, that is, listen, what you all are suggesting and doing, when the monsoon comes, it's going to damage the crops. The crops are not going to survive. They didn't listen to the local farmers. They went ahead with their engineering concepts. And what happened? As soon as the monsoon came, it damaged the crops. And they had to go back eventually to what the farmers were saying initially. That's one of the beauty of the cooperative, that they would be able to know their environment, know their communities, and in terms of that social and economic development, which is critical, because I'm talking about the development of the human being here in terms of the farmers as our target group. So it could be a combination, it could be partnering, but always the people must have, the farmers that is, must have control of their final destiny.
I don't know about Trinidad and Tobago, but in some parts of Africa, culture is something which is very important, right? Something which is a taboo in one culture is not a taboo in the other. How do you think this will fit in the light of cultures, different cultures?
Just repeat the question, sorry.
I said in Africa, there are so many cultures, right? People have been practicing farming, different types of farming for some times, whatever, today. So one thing which is a taboo in one culture, it's not a taboo in the
Yeah.
other. So how, in the light of this cooperative, how do we deal with the cultures? Training?
Okay. And that is a very important consideration, because cultural differences are very not necessary in terms of looking at what you're doing. And therefore, one size will not fit all in terms of how you form the cooperative. At the end of the day, and that's why I'll come back and stress, the people themselves must understand, they will know their culture, they will know what can and what cannot do. In some areas, even having females farming might be frowned upon, maybe. But the point about it is they will have the opportunity to look at what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities and what are the threats. They can examine and evaluate those from the bottom up. But at the end of the day, cultural differences do make a difference. In some areas, it will be very easy to introduce and run. And in some areas, it take time. Right now, I'm working with a group of persons who to form a co-op, and we have been working on it for over a year. And simply because they are all not on the same page. And in order to go forward, you must have them on at least reading from the same book. All right. So that's how I would respond to that question. But a very important question, Doc.
Yes. Thank you so much for this feedback. We'll move on to the next question to Pastor Gary. What is your view about the effect of climate change on agriculture would depend on the rate and severity of the change, as well as the degree to which the farmers and the ranchers can adapt?
Well, I'll tell you, in considering that, what I gave thought to was history, going back and just taking a quick look at history. And history has shown us that the rate of change has shown significant increase in how the rapidity of the weather patterns and cycles are coming into play nowadays. There's a vast difference from what we are accustomed to historically in the past and how things are occurring now. And it seems to be a bit strange even at times. While the severity has greatly impacted change in the climate with more force and intensity with regard to seemingly unpredictable weather patterns. It's like nowadays we can look at the weather forecast and we can quickly discern that it's not stable. It's not dependable because things are happening in such a different way now. So that effect on climate change and agriculture is really, really huge. And again, the degree to which the farmers and ranchers can adapt to those types of changes, it's what's going to bring that balance that we talked about. For example, what we can do, firstly, there needs to be a unified front with those who have interest and stake in creating change by taking action to incorporate climate smart farming methods. No one group can accomplish this alone. And this just goes back to the beginning of creation. God created us with gifts and talents to benefit the other persons. And so if we're not taking those gifts and talents and bringing them into a place where others can benefit, then no one's going to benefit. There's not going to be any progress. So we must have the mindset that we together in unity can come up with concepts and ideas to put action to what needs to be done in regards to climate action. For example, farmers can research and consider use of climate forecasting tools, plant cover crops such as cereal, rye, red clover, hairy veg, which are all winter hardy crops that can help control weeds, improve soil tilth, reduce erosion, etc., just to name a few. So they can also take other steps to help manage climate-related production threats. But that's something, again, it needs to be done in a unified manner so that it has a global effect. They can also boost crop resistance by adopting research-proven ways to reduce the impacts of climate change on crops and livestock, such as reducing pesticides, as I mentioned earlier, by replacing chemical-based pesticides with biological green alternatives and methods of improving pollination. I want us to consider this. Let's consider the effects of climate change on agriculture isn't always, isn't always a negative. We tend to look at climate change in a negative perspective, but it isn't always negative. For example, one of the main drivers that really affect crop growth in the field and is less known or less talked about is carbon dioxide. CO2 in the air. The CO2 effect creates climate change of the will, while at the same time, some crops love it. Some crops really thrive on the presence of the CO2. And, excuse me, the plant growth is stimulated by CO2, and at the same time, it creates adverse effects through all of these cascading effects of climate change. So what can we do? I believe that we can research and assess ways to identify the crops which thrive on the effects of CO2. That's one thing. And then those that don't, to create systems that could possibly offer some form of balance from one region to another globally. And this, I believe, is what we can do to help bring that balance that we're talking about. And again, it goes back to us coming together in unification to bring these systems into play. And they will have, I believe, a great effect for good on climate change concerning agriculture and food production.
Can I ask one quick question quickly? You've been talking, we all have been talking about unification. That unification, should it be driven from above, like say UN, and then comes down to the various countries to adopt this differently, such a way that all the countries are part of a big body?
Absolutely, absolutely. I believe that we start at the top of the, as far as organizationally, and because of the far reach of the UN and the respect of the UN, to be able to bring this type of dialogue to the table, I believe would give ear to those who are coming from a different place on a lower scale as far as their reach and their resources and such. If the inference is placed on unity from the upper levels, I think it will have more impact globally with the other organizations, the farmers, et cetera, et cetera.
And what I will add to what Pastor Gary just said in terms of unification, I think we are not too far from that, because this particular summer, 2023, it looks like every region around the world did experience some level of flooding. Flooding in the United States, flooding in Ghana, flooding in the Philippines, flooding in Nigeria, in China. So as the issue becomes very common, unification becomes very easy, because we are almost dealing with the same thing, irrespective of location. And that's where unification can come in. So the UN could lead, and all the various regions around the world will follow, because our mission statement is unified. We're all experiencing the same issues.
So that means that we, being climate action can take the opportunity to actually present something of this sort to UN as a framework which can be built. So we have 13 ESG, 17 ESG. We have the opportunity to add one to make it even, right? So it's an opportunity. So the way that for whatever we've said, you know, in the 17 ESG, unification is important. So it's an opportunity for us to present something to the UN as we've done in the past. That's why I wanted to touch on this. Does anybody have anything to add to what Pastor Gary just said before we move to the next question? If not, I think we have 9 minutes. We'll go ahead to the next question such a way that we can save some time. And then if there's more time, we can discuss about more stuff. So the next question will be directed towards Dr. Jackie here. You know, the question here is, from your vantage position, what are some of the recommendations that the global economy can adopt to mitigate climate change impact on food security?
Thank you for the question. For the benefit of time, what I'm going to bulletize this response for everyone's consideration. The first thing is we need to implement climate smart agriculture. This is mandatory. This is becoming business critical. And the nurturing of our forest landscape for future adaptation of climate change. So climate change is not final. This is just the beginning. It's going to get worse moving forward. And therefore, we need to keep this as a learning activity. Trees, grass have the ability to decarbonize the environment. And therefore, we need to incentivize the planting of these trees. So in the past, most of these industrial agriculture will purchase large acres of land and clear and cut all trees in its path just to industrialize, just to plant what we need. Moving forward, we may have to plant what we call sustainable trees. So even though your intent is to grow tomatoes, you'll be forced to plant some trees on that same land. And those trees will serve as sustainable trees. Additionally, the practice of greenhouse farming needs to be boosted up. We need to enhance in that area. Even though the square footage may be limited, the supply of food is guaranteed in the face of climate change. So the greenhouse, you have a controlled environment, climate change or not, your greenhouse will survive. Even though the square footage might be limited, there's some level of guarantee in that area. Those are some of the two recommendations that I would like to put out there for everyone's consideration.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything? Because I have something I wanted to bring out to us to discuss. I remember, Dr. Jackie, you mentioned about trees. I know trees during photosynthesis will absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. Is that correct? What happens at night for trees? Because photosynthesis occurs in the presence of sunlight, which is daytime, so that way the carbon dioxide can be absorbed and produce oxygen. But I do know in the night sometimes, some plants can absorb oxygen.
Yes, some plants have that ability. The majority of the plant, let me use layman's terminology, go to sleep at night in the absence of light, in the absence of sunlight. They go a little bit dormant, and when the daylight start coming up, then they continue with the process. So there's some level of dormancy at night in the absence of light, but there are some special plants that do consume oxygen, but the percentage is relatively low.
Low, okay. So, Pastor Gary, this is just a kind of a quick question here. I remember we said the rate of change of the climate and then the rate of change of farmers, right? Adaptability.
Yes.
There's a possibility that at some point, if we don't do anything about what is going on, right, in terms of the changes going on, then the rate of climate change can supersede that of the rate of adaptation. In that case, what is likely to happen? Even in the light of what we are trying to do, there's more population is growing. People haven't heard much about it, right? So in the other people's natural way, people want a place to live. So they are continuing clearing lands. You could see nowadays some of the houses. If you see one person's house, it's like a stadium, right? Mm-hmm. You know, and then the only two people living there, and they are all taking surfaces of the earth when it rains. Water is supposed to seep back into the ground for us to fill our aquifers, surface waters, and the rest. But this is all going on. Do you think, in the light of what Jackie said, I mean, this general, what should we be doing? How fast should this climate action, linked to sustainability, how fast should this go? Because I'm afraid that population keep on growing, and as population grows, things are dwindling. Now, people in the light of population, people in the light of what is going on, they still want better condition of life, and that better condition of life is also impacting on the ecology. So, how should we, as a group, go forward and make sure that things are working well? Though the unification is very important, but I see the rates is what my fear is. Anybody can chime in with anything?
Yes, I'd like to add a little bit. Human beings are very adaptive, and climate change has not been an area that has been studied thoroughly, but the opportunity has presented itself. The universities are taking hold of this climate change. Most of the corporate world has sustainability actions that it's not part-time, it's a full-time type of mission and vision statements. So it's an area that needs to be studied thoroughly for potential adaptation to identify actions that can answer your question. How do we outpace climate change versus the vice versa? So again, yeah, I believe after a year or so, there will be some more light, there will be some more content as to how we can mitigate this particular issue.
So participants, listeners, I think our time is up. Sheridan, I would love you to continue, but we only have 2 minutes to wrap up. So what I would say is it was a very good discussion. We wish we can have more time to do this, but we have only 1 hour. It's almost time. Sometime early December, we are looking to come online again with another topic, which we can discuss more. In the meantime, I'll give Pastor Gary to do the wrap-up, final remarks, and then wrap up.
Well, final remarks to wrap up our discussion. I will simply go back to the beginning. I love going back to the beginning because, that's where the resources are. And so going back to the beginning, I want to close with talking about the power of unity, embracing the ideas and thoughts of others to collectively locate and implement solutions to resolve or lessen the negative effects of climate change. And again, this is something that we must do together. And this is also something that we must expedite to the best of our ability to get this information out there and even tie in with governments to develop regulations to curb some of what Dr. Jackie was talking about the building that's going on and how people are destroying lands by tearing down the trees, so on and so forth. We must gain some sort of control of those methods of things being done. And so that is my take on our discussion today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You all, and thank you, listeners. You'll hear from us in December. We'll give you the actual date. So stay put with us with the information to join us next time. And thank you all participants too. And you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you.